Freedom Awards speaker, Sam Goldstein. Sam Goldstein is a former 4-year chairman of the Indiana LP. He served on the LNC in various capacities for 10 years. He has run for office 8 times. He has managed campaigns for Libertarian Party candidates from statewide races to local races. And one night of making phone calls, he and the vice chair of the county party in Indianapolis recruited 17 candidates, one night of calls. Man, Greg, that sounds like an inspiration to us. Okay, please welcome Sam Goldstein.
Thank you, Missouri Libertarian Party, for inviting me. This is going to be fun. I tend not to lecture as much as hopefully get people involved in a discussion about the topic at hand, which is how do you recruit candidates, and once you have them recruited and on the ballot, how do you manage their campaign? So unlike other speakers, if you have a question during my talk, feel free to stick your hand up and we'll address your question. I might ask some questions of you. For instance, in this room, how many of y'all have already run for office as a Libertarian? Wow, I'm impressed. Very good. How many of you are going to run again in 2020? That's not enough. More people need to raise their hands. Can somebody answer this question? When is the proper time for the Libertarian Party of Missouri to organize their candidate recruitment effort for 2020? How about like 3 months ago? But as soon as possible. What I'd like to do, and when I was state chair in Indiana and county chair in Indianapolis, which is Marion County, we have really good ballot access in Indiana. In Indiana, it takes 2 signatures to get on the ballot. The signature of the state chair and the state secretary, or the signature of the county chair and the county secretary if it's a county race or a state race. This allows us the flexibility of running a lot of candidates, and candidates ranging, as Bill said earlier, from paper candidates to those who are deeply involved and committed to their campaigns. We have run quite a few candidates in Indiana over the years. When I was county chair, as Bill said, we recruited in one night 17 candidates and ended up with a maximum, I think, about 35 candidates in our county that year for municipal races. There were 25 district spots for the Indianapolis, Marion County City County Council, 4 at-large spots in mayor, plus within the city of Indianapolis and Marion County, there are still some other remnant cities like Speedway and Lawrence and a few others that also have their city councils and mayors, which is really a duplication of government at every level in the county. So we ended up running 35 or 40 candidates that year, more candidates in our county than in many other states in the country. As a result of that effort and the sheer number of candidates that we had on the ballot, the League of Women Voters and the people organizing local debates and forums woke up, and our mayoral candidate that year was in at least 15 to 20 different debates and forums around the county. Everybody wanted to have all the candidates. There were 4 candidates for mayor that year because an independent socialist somehow got on the ballot as well. We ended up doing well. We ended up getting around 5% of the vote across the county, and that's significant because Indianapolis in our county has moved from being almost strictly Republican county to being a Democratic county recently, and we were getting support from across the board for our candidates. So at least 1 year prior to Election Day, or longer, depending on what kind of ballot access battles you have to fight, like in Illinois and in many of the other states that we don't currently have ballot access in. Form a candidate recruitment committee, Bill. If you're reelected chair this afternoon, I would encourage you to do so. Select 3 or 4 people who are hard workers, or known to want to get stuff done, and we'll dive right into the task of finding people who are willing to run for office on the Libertarian Party ticket in your state. How do you do that? Well, I had a discussion about databases earlier with a couple people, and how do you find people to run in districts? When we found those 17 people in that one night to run for office, we had a huge wall map on a pin board, and I'm kind of old school. We took everybody's physical address and stuck push pins in each of the 25 districts in Marion County, finding out that we actually had human beings living in each one of those 25 districts. And we had sent out, then our next step then was to send out a letter to them, actually a physical letter. I know that's unheard of these days when everything has to be done electronically. But we sent out a letter to these people asking them to run for office and telling them we would be calling them within a week or so to make sure they were going to sign up and run for office. And then we did that. And a few people turned us down, a few people said yes reluctantly, and a few people signed on and have become active candidates ever since. But people like to be asked, so you need to organize first and then ask with some preparation, with a letter, some phone calls, some way of letting people know that you're going to be contacting them to run for office. If you're in a county or a state where you haven't run a lot of offices or don't know what the cycle of elections are, determine which offices are up for election by contacting either your local or state election board, and know your ballot access laws in detail. I already said that. Depending on how hard it is to get somebody on the ballot, you might want to start prepping and getting money for that effort as soon as possible. The old parties, here's another thing, and it caught us in Indiana a couple years ago. The old parties changed the laws and not forget to tell anybody about it. So in Indiana, we used to be able to fill ballot vacancies by just the county party filing a couple pieces of paper with the election board before the June 30th filing deadline. At some point in time, the legislature changed the law saying that, and this is really convoluted, even though the filing deadline for vacancies is June 30th, you have to let your county clerk know which vacancies you're filing 10 days beforehand in a letter sent to the county clerk. And one county forgot to do that or wasn't aware of that, and they threw 8 of our people off the ballot because they hadn't followed the exact letter of the law. They could have cut some people some slack and let them on the ballot by amending the petition, but you know, the Republicans just didn't like that. In fact, in that county, I think it was the Democrats. But these are things that you have to be aware of. You have to be aware of the laws and how they change. Campaign finance laws are also something that you need to be aware of if you're running for office. Do you need to file campaign finance forms with either your county clerk or the state clerk? Somebody mentioned ethics forms earlier. I mean, that's been a big thing recently, that now at every level of office in Indiana, even for like Township Advisory Board, which is the lowest elective office, you still have to file ethics forms with either the county clerk or the state election board, just so they'll know that you're ethical enough to be a politician. Databases are very important because a database tells you a lot of things. It tells you, hopefully, when you have somebody's physical address, what district they're going to be able to run in, be it congressional district, state senate, state rep, all those boundaries cross over. And I think one of the things that the CRM project that the national party is working on will hopefully be able to provide state and then county people in charge of chairs the ability to go into those programs and do a sort by zip code or sort by district to find out, you know, and Sean's nodding his head back there because he's probably more conversant with than I am, but it's going to give us a lot more flexibility as a national party to give help to our state affiliates and county affiliates to be able to do things that we're supposed to be doing, which is running people for office. Set goals. Somebody mentioned setting goals earlier today. It's always good to have a goal in mind. So if I say, hey, Libertarian Party Missouri, the Indiana Party, we're roughly equivalent in the same size, is going to run probably 100 candidates next year, what would your response be? You going to beat us? Pat Dixon still owes me a steak dinner. I think he was state chair in Texas, and I think we ran more candidates than he did one year, and he and I had a private bet. And the Libertarian Party of Texas is one hell of a lot bigger than the Indiana Party. So you have to decide if you want to run a lot of candidates, if you're okay with quality versus quantity. It's an age-old Libertarian Party question. Do you want a bunch of candidates running for office, which is honestly my preference, because it at least gives people a choice other than the old two parties. They're going to have a choice on, when they get into the election booth, they're going to have Libertarian, Republican, Democrat, perhaps Green Party in some states, perhaps Constitution Party, but at the very least they're going to have a choice other than just the two old parties, even if that person's name just appears on the ballot and they haven't really done anything actively during the campaign season. Some people argue that no, we should just run high-quality candidates so they're going to have a chance to win. And there are valued arguments for that too, but that takes a lot of money, as Laura pointed out earlier. We don't have a lot of money to spend, so you need to be as circumspect as you can by pinpointing a few candidates that you think could possibly have a chance of winning, and then giving the people a choice of a lot of other candidates. You really only have a limited time to recruit people. So you need to contact your potential candidates as soon as possible, get whatever paperwork that's appropriate filled out, have it, if you nominate by convention or if you participate in primary system in your state, however it is, start recruiting people now so that when next spring rolls around and the formal election process starts, that you know who's going to be on your ballot and you know what forms they have to fill out, and you know what processes they have to go through. Any questions so far? I know I'm fascinating, so I'll just keep going. Here's some truths about recruiting candidates. This is subsequent to when you send out the letter, subsequent to telling people that you're going to start asking people to run for office. People are actually flattered to be asked to be run for office. You send the initial contact letter to your potential candidates outlining what offices they might want to consider to run for and how they'd help the party retain high visibility and viability by consenting to run. Tell them the great libertarian lie. We won't ask you to do anything other than just fill out this paperwork. Sometimes that lie comes back to bite you in the butt, but it does get people actively involved. And if they have fun running a political campaign, because I've run 8 times, and I've had fun every time I've run for office. I've gotten to debate people on a statewide stage. I've been on statewide radio hookups. I've gotten to participate in forums that I would not have with state reps when I ran for state rep. And in many ways, I've been able to point out their errors of their ways when they're talking about what the proper function of government is. There's a proper function of government for sure, but we need to limit it to as little as possible and allow people the liberty to do what they want to with their lives. Follow up on your initial letter when you send it out. A week to 10 days, have your committee make phone calls. Just sit down and gather in one spot if you can, or across the state. Take your list of people that you sent the letters to, chop it up into manageable bits so each person makes 15 or 20 phone calls in one night, and just call them and tell them it's time to make a choice. Are you going to run and represent the Libertarian Party of Missouri next fall in the election, or are you just going to let your local representative be elected without any opposition whatsoever? A lot of people will make that choice to go ahead and let you put their name on the ballot. Follow up on that with making sure that they get the proper paperwork filed. I understand in Missouri they have to pay some kind of token filing fee that the state party gets to keep anyway, which is a hell of an advantage. And that way you do a fundraiser for the party by getting more people to run as well, right, Bill? Yes. Finally, before you actually put them on the ballot, I would caution you to vet your candidates. In Indiana, we had a congressional candidate that somehow got on the ballot at our convention, and nobody ever told us he was a convicted felon of wife beating. So when we found that out, we had all our candidates fill out a candidate vetting form, and he kind of forgot to mention that he was a convicted felon accused of wife beating, which I think is a violation of the NAP, and we legitimately had a reason to take his name off the ballot, which we then basically told the State Board of Elections that he was no longer a Libertarian Party candidate, filled the form out, taking him off the ballot, and he said he was going to go find a lawyer and sue us, but in that case, he couldn't find a lawyer because we had a signed form that said nowhere on it that he had been convicted of felony. I have a sample copy of the 2018 Indiana vetting form here, and this is the form that was required in 2018 of anybody wanting the nomination of the state party for a statewide race or for any race that's nominated at our state convention, which is basically all the General Assembly, county prosecutors for some bizarre reason, and all the statewide offices and federal offices. They submitted this. They had to have it signed off on by at least 2 people who are officers in the state party, so we wouldn't have anybody slip in a form that at least some of our people weren't aware of. And it gives all the basic contact information. And the last page, Karen Ann, if she was here, would be happy. It lists a bunch of the Libertarian Party platform positions and asks where they stand on those positions. So if we forgot to ask a question once of a candidate for Congress in Eastern Indiana, are you in favor of a maximum wage? Because that's not a question that normally comes up. But in the course of his campaign, he came out in favor of a maximum wage, and that kind of made some of our eyes glaze over a little bit. It was too late to take him off the ballot, but we certainly were aware of the fact that we need to ask and vet our candidates better at some point in the future. So if you have the ability to do that politically in Missouri, before you actually put people on the ballot, have them fill out some kind of form. And so at least you have basic information for when the press calls you and asks you who your candidate is in this particular town or particular district. You'll have their contact information, and then you have a wealth of information about people for future runs for office. Then there's also attached to this, and if anybody wants copies of all this stuff, I could certainly send it to you in a PDF file. My email address, if you want it, is sam.goldstein@lp.org. So if you want copies of this stuff, I didn't bring a bunch of stuff with me. I'd be happy to send you copies of it and let you do with it what as you want. There's a sample phone script at the back of this little presentation as well. If you have people who are not used to getting on the phone and asking people for stuff or talking about stuff with people, there's a phone script back here that will take them through the process of calling somebody that you'd already sent a letter out to and asking them if they want to be on the ballot. That's kind of the first half, putting your candidate recruitment effort together and trying to figure out how many candidates you could run in your state, what the maximum is, what the minimum that you would be happy with would be, and moving forward into then helping them manage their campaigns. Any questions at this point in time? Yes, sir.
I think one of the challenges is finding people who are willing to make phone calls to those people. So you and one other person at least make phone calls. How many people do you have who will make phone calls?
It really depends. I mean, making phone calls is not an easy thing for people to do. And that's why I suggest you try to do it in a group setting where everybody it used to have multiple lines in a building. You don't have to do that anymore because everybody has cell phones. But if you have a central location where people could meet one evening and just sit down together, the group dynamics makes it a lot easier to make phone calls. And if you have somebody that's experienced and 2 or 3 people who are unexperienced but they want to learn how to do it, just sit down and make 2 or 3 phone calls in front of them on speakerphone. Have them go through the process of talking to somebody, convincing somebody to be put on the ballot, and then cut them loose to try to make their own phone calls. I mean, it's trial and error. You don't always get the right people to do it, but the more you try, at least you're eventually going to find some people who are willing to do it for you.
That's the theoretical answer. How
Yeah.
many, you had 100 candidates. How many people did you have on the phone to get those 100 candidates?
At that point in time, I had the advantage of having a fully paid, full-time executive director. So he pretty much did what I told him to, and he made a bunch of phone calls.
No chance.
And he's, I don't know, you probably know, many of you might see his blog, We Are Libertarians. Chris Spangle was his name, if you're familiar with Chris. He was our executive director for the state party for about 6 years, and then we just couldn't pay him enough. But he was great. And beyond him, we had some people that were willing to make phone calls. But since he was a full-time staff member, he was the contact person for doing most of that work. And then we actually physically sent out physical mailings to every Libertarian Party member in the state as the initial contact letter outlining what positions were going to be open for those positions, and then contacting people either by email or by phone call multiple times. And we did vet some people and chose not to put some names on the ballot for a variety of reasons, but we had great success doing that and got a lot of people on the ballot. And we ended up getting, I think, 7 or 8 people elected in Indiana. Every single race in the state is partisan except for local school board. So it's really tough. And we still have straight ticket voting, which only, I think, 4 or 5 states have. So somebody who wants to vote for Libertarian down ticket really has to search for somebody to vote for and not just draw in the circle of what are the party symbols are at the top of the form, of the voting form. Okay, so once you have your candidate on the ballot, how do you organize and manage a campaign? And my campaign management part of this discussion is primarily aimed at statewide or federal races. It can certainly be scaled down to when I ran my most recent race in 2015 for City County Council. I had a campaign manager that was part-time, and she and I pretty much managed the whole campaign and did all these separate functions and farmed out like website to a couple people and Facebook page to a couple people. But we did most of the work ourselves in a smaller campaign like that. But for a statewide campaign for either federal or governor or secretary of state, if you have a big race there, or Senate, you really need a full campaign staff. The first time I managed a statewide campaign for the Libertarian Party of Indiana was in 2000, and we had a great candidate for governor. Very charismatic guy. He was a great candidate, very knowledgeable. Unfortunately, the only two things he really couldn't do was that he told us he was genetically incapable of asking people for money, which is a big no-no. And then he also didn't know much about basketball. And in Indiana, that's a no-no. We had to educate him on Indiana basketball. So the candidate, basically, in that kind of race, has just two functions. The candidate talks to voters and asks people for money. The candidate should not be touching your website, should not be tweeting, should not be doing anything other than being the face of the campaign, establishing policy positions, maybe writing policy papers if you don't have somebody to write them, but the candidate should not be working on the website, should not be making phone calls except to thank people for contributions, should be the face of the campaign to the voters. The campaign manager, on the other hand, basically is the CEO of the campaign, oversees all functions and does everything else, and makes sure everything runs smoothly behind the scenes, and make sure the candidate gets to the appointments on time and in the appropriate dress. We had to teach him how to tie a tie also. I don't think he'd ever worn a tie before. But those are the kinds of things that the campaign manager does. Treasurer, self-explanatory, keeps all the books for the campaign, makes sure that the filings get done with either the FEC if it's a federal race or with the state, whoever in your state controls the finances for campaigns. Usually the Secretary of State's office has an election board. And that person, you really have to find somebody that's, first of all, honest and trustworthy and willing to go to jail if they mess up, because those are criminal offenses if you make serious errors on your campaign finance forms. Communications coordinator, basically all external communications other than on the internet. And then there's another coordinator that I've labeled news media coordinator or new media coordinator, and that would be Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all the things that are more modern than I am at this point in time, so younger people probably know more about that. Event coordinator manages the candidate's calendar, schedules speaking engagements, manages debates and forums if there are such in that race, does all the things to keep the candidate up to date and on task as far as where they're supposed to be and when they're supposed to be, transportation, that kind of stuff, to make sure people get where they're supposed to go. Sean and I were talking about this earlier. What's more important, yard signs or having people at the polls on election day? So you really need somebody who's a volunteer coordinator, because having somebody staffing the polling places at election day, if it's allowed in your state, however far you have to be from wherever the rules are, handing out literature, or even just holding your candidate sign in their hand has a lot more direct impact on getting votes than some of the other things that you might spend a lot of time and money on during the course of the campaign, because that's immediately when the voter is finally thinking about the election season that's going on. Usually they don't think about it until they're on their way to the polls, and if your name is the last thing they say, they see, or somebody hands something to them on their way into the poll, and that's the last thing they hear before they walk in, there's a good chance they're going to think, well, I don't know any of these people, so this guy had somebody out there, or I met the guy out in the parking lot, so I'm going to vote for that guy. What is the mother's milk of politics? I'll ask this question. You guys should know the answer. Money, absolutely. So you need a fundraising coordinator. Probably the toughest job to place in a campaign, because as with Andy Horning in 2000, people just don't like to ask for money. But you have to have money to do all those things that I mentioned above, to have a website, to have people running food out to your workers on election day, to have yard signs if you're going to get them, to do mailings such as Laura mentioned earlier. Those are all things that you should be responsible as libertarians to fund yourself in your campaign. The state party may have money to give you if they have targeted your race. The national party, on rare occasion, might have money to give you if we think that your race isn't going to be impactful on a ballot access race in your state, or if you're an incumbent running for election. Those are a couple of things we look at if we ever have extra money to give contributions to local candidates. But you need a fundraising coordinator to deal with the money coming in, the money going out, in cooperation with the treasurer, making sure that all the paperwork gets done properly, and that the money that's coming in is legal money that you could spend. In Indiana, we can't take contributions of more than $1,000 from labor unions or different kinds of business organizations such as LLCs and corporations, but there's like no limit whatsoever from individuals. So we like to see individual money come in rather than those other business entities. Finally, in a statewide race, you really should have somebody coordinating, at least at the level of each congressional district. So when the county fair is going on in this county, your district coordinator should coordinate with the event coordinator to make sure that if they want your candidate to show up at that county fair, there's a reason for them to be there. Instead of just showing up and talking to a couple Libertarian Party members in the booth all day, are they going to be talking to voters? Are you going to get the local news media in for an interview? Are you going to be able to raise enough money to pay for them to come down there so that it's worthwhile to go there? I sometimes discourage candidates from chasing all over the state if they're just going to go to a place where they're just talking to Libertarians, because hopefully the people in the room are going to vote for them anyway. You need to give them a reason to get out into the public and talk to people, and your district coordinators in each of your congressional districts usually know the people in their individual counties that are going to be able to help you do those things. Finally, we have an old wise guy council, or I should probably say old wise person advisory council, people who have been there like me or have been around for a while, have been there and done that, and you can just give advice to the candidate on an informal basis on the kinds of things that sometimes work, sometimes don't work, and some people who are not directly deeply involved in the campaign to bounce things off of from time to time. That seems to work well because sometimes good ideas come out of those kind of informal meetings and discussion groups. That's about it. I mean, I would certainly hope that you guys would want to run a lot of candidates since you have relatively simple ballot access here in the state. And if you want to sit down and go over some individuals in your executive council meeting or whatever your meeting is, the committee meeting, try to form a group of people who are going to recruit candidates. And I don't know if you guys have this position in your state party, but it's good to have a political director of a state party. We have one in Indiana, and he's done a great job over the past several years of getting people organized and getting campaigns organized and up and running. Questions?
Are you paying that guy?
Pardon?
Are you paying that guy?
No, he's a volunteer. And he's actually from Nebraska. Laura knew him real well before he moved to Indiana.
Have you found a different way to deal with the media now that their role has changed, given the proliferation of people getting their news over the internet?
You know, that's a good question. Normally, the first thing I tell a new candidate, especially in a major office like congressional or statewide, or even a state rep office, is the first thing you do three things. You go out and have good pictures taken. You create a bullet point postcard or just group of 3 or 4 things that are going to be your bullet points for the campaign. Then you send out a media kit with that picture in it to every media person that's in your market. And now there's a great proliferation, as you said, of people who are on the internet who claim to be press people or media people, and they might have an audience of half a dozen people to listen to them on a daily basis. So that's something that I don't really know how to address at this point in time. I mean, the major news media, the TV outlets and the newspapers and the radio stations, I still think get the great proportionate amount of attention from the public, and the people on the internet and on the webs think they do, but I've never seen them really have a direct impact on an election campaign to any great extent. Adam?
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about different state parties having executive directors or not? I don't know how many there are in the country right now. Maybe could answer that.
I honestly don't know the answer to that question, but I can tell you that in Indiana, when I joined the party in 1999, they had already had a full-time staff executive director for at least 5 years before that. And we continued that tradition through wealth and famine for at least 10 or 15 years after that. And Chris Spangle was our last full-time paid executive director. He resigned to go into the news media about 5 years ago. And quite bluntly, the state party has not done as well since we didn't make the sacrifices to have full-time paid staff. We've run fewer candidates. We have less organization than we did by having at least him or one of his predecessors be responsible for the daily running of the party. I would highly recommend that if a state party does anything with money that they have stashed away is to hire somebody that's going to be paid staff, because volunteers are much harder to manage and to tell what to do than paid staff.
So how important is it for a party? Should they be prioritizing getting to that level of having an executive director? And what would you recommend for fundraising or organization support to make that possible?
I would say it's extremely important. In Indiana, when I keep referring back to when I was state chair, but even my predecessors, we regained our ballot access in Indiana in 1994. We had it before, and then Ross Perot ran and attracted some third-party votes, so they raised it from like 0.5% to 2% in the Secretary of State's race. Well, that was the last time the National Party gave the State Party of Indiana any money for petitioning to get on the ballot, and we've maintained our ballot access ever since. So what they did back then before my time in the party is they formed a monthly contribution organization called the 1994 Society. And the minimum monthly contribution, I think, is $10 a month or $120 a year. And at the peak, we were bringing in almost $3,000 a month. And that was guaranteed money every month that we were bringing into the state party to fund primarily the executive director position. And that was probably 50 or 60 people contributing that. We had other people that would drop in single amounts from time to time or give us major contributions from time to time. So I think our total budget was maybe about $50,000 a year. It's tough to get somebody good to work for $35,000 a year because we had other expenses, but we had great success in finding people who were really dedicated to the cause, that were perhaps younger and didn't have a lot of responsibilities, but were bright, upcoming people in the party, and we were able to identify people that were willing to work very hard. I guarantee you that they worked more than 30 or 40 hours a week for us, and like some of the current staff and people at National that are on contract, I guarantee you those people work a lot more than they bill us for. I think there's a volunteer model and a paid staff model, and I think if it's at all possible, by making sacrifices maybe in other areas, if you could hire full-time paid staff, that would be a high priority if I was in charge of a state party.
Help me with the number. You mentioned 7 people were elected on the Libertarian Party ticket, or was it that you have 7 different offices that had people elected as Libertarians? What was that information?
I think in 2018 we had 7 people elected or re-elected to partisan office. The highest level one is a town judge in Hagerstown, Indiana, Susan Bell, who actually ran unopposed because she's turned out to be such a good judge. The Republicans and Democrats in her town haven't put anybody up against her for the past 2 election terms. The first time she ran for town judge, this is a weird position in Indiana. It's an infractions court, and you don't even have to be a lawyer to be a town judge. It's just, the state police will come in and bring their tickets in there. And at first, they were reluctant to bring their tickets into her court because they as a libertarian, she was never going to find in favor of the police. But she basically gave everybody fair hearing and cleared a backlog of hundreds and hundreds of cases that her predecessor had left. And the office is running at half the cost it was before. And the people in that little town like her well enough to keep re-electing her. The other people we got elected were in small towns that they're not nonpartisan races, but they're small enough towns that everybody in the town knows these people, and they ran on our party ticket and got elected to the town councils. Anybody else? Any questions? Yes, sir? Just speak up. I could hear you.
Has any libertarian candidates have put forth a full legalization petition, or would what if somebody who wants to be? Because I'm not a very good public speaker, I get a little nervous, but I need somebody to help actually be the person that knows their cannabis facts and actually help lead the public leaders for Missouri cannabis reform. Is there any way that maybe the Libertarian Party can help me out with that?
You mean the National Party? I mean, I think this.
However much help I can give with this petition, I'd be more than happy to, because we already got a Facebook page with like 3,300 likes so far. We got a group that's 1,500 Missourians or people that live right on the border that can actually help
I think the proper people to approach with that question would be your executive committee when they're reelected this afternoon, because the National Party really doesn't have a mechanism for helping with local petition drives like that. And there were 2 people in this room already today that apparently have organized petition drives on various factors, and maybe they could give some guidelines on how to do it, how to write the petition properly. First of all, how to get it filed with the Secretary of State or Attorney General's office, and then you got to have the money or the people to be able to get those petition signatures done in, I guess, what, a year, Bill, from the filing deadline? From the date it's filing, is it a year that they have to get those signatures in? Sounded like to me. But no, unfortunately, the state, the National Party just doesn't have a way of doing that. Yes, ma'am.
Just as far as you running in a local race and say, you can't find enough people to fill all these roles that you mentioned, do you think, is it more priority to find someone who can be a campaign manager or a fundraising manager?
I'd say campaign manager, because the candidate at that point in time, like I did in my last city county council race, there was just myself and the campaign manager, and we found a few people to do a few other things from time to time, but I was the one that basically went out and raised money. The Republicans actually gave me $4,500 that race, because we both hated the Democrats so much they wanted me to pull votes away from the Democratic side of the ticket. And we ended up, I didn't win, but we ended up getting the Republican elected, who was much better for a choice for liberty than the Democrat was. So yeah, I mean, it's scalable downwards. I mean, if you only have 4 people, just split up the jobs to the best of those people's ability. Okay, well, thanks a lot, Missouri, and I look forward to seeing many of you. I'm going to put another shameless plug in for the National Convention. I look forward to seeing many of you at Austin, Texas next Memorial Day weekend, because they don't call us a party for nothing. We're going to have fun.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Sam. Let's see if I can get this going here. Okay, as we round out our luncheon and awards, the next part of our agenda is to honor some people with some awards. We have a couple 3-4 people, a couple 3-4 awards. So bear with me as I try to read through this, which is all the technical difficulty we've had today isn't so easy. Should have printed it out. Champion of Freedom Award. Our first Champion of Freedom Award today is for Cecil Ince. Cecil cut his teeth on the LP. Greg remembers Cecil coming to the monthly state party meetings in Jefferson City, where he was quite young. Not that he isn't still quite that young. This would have been in the late 90s. Greg remembers him coming up with Phil Horace, who is no longer with us, but a fellow from Springfield who figured large in Missouri LP. Cecil is true blue. You can count on him. His dedication to the party runs deep and wide. He's a regular candidate. He's an officer in the Greene County Party. He organized this convention, and you can count on the fact that Cecil isn't going anywhere soon. Cecil, please come up for your Cecil.
Oh, you love me. You really love me. Pictures?
Our next Champion of Freedom Award is for Tom Rollett. Tom was a rising star and active in both St. Louis County and the state party. Tom took an initiative to create a program to activate county organizations. He got the blessing of the state party and is working on it. Already successful in getting the Perry County LP underway. One of the fellows he met there is here today. Is Wally here today? Maybe not. LaDonna Higgins, chair of the St. Louis County LP, has sung his praises, and I'm honored to present him with the Champion of Freedom Award. More power to you, Tom. You have a few minutes if you'd like to talk about it. Oh, there you go. Anything you want to say, you can feel free.
Not yet.
Okay, not yet? Okay. Our next award was I created a couple of years ago, and we have only handed it out one time. This is the Mike Bozarth Award. Mike Bozarth was one of the original capital L libertarians, having found his way there in the early 70s. Mike had owned the St. Louis Telegraph, having published libertarian editorials in it for almost 7 years. He wrote as a guest columnist for almost 6 years, and prior to buying the paper. His newspaper was one of the 2 newspapers in the state officially affiliated with the Libertarian Party, the other being the Sedalia Democrat. For all of Mike's accomplishments and service to the party, we honor his memory with this as a great libertarian. This award today is going to go to Randy Lonkaker. What I can say about Randy to begin with, might be able to help pronounce his name, which I've never done well. For the churchgoers, think long prayer and put a K where the P is. Long prayer becomes Lonkaker. Something close to that. Is that right, Randy? Is Randy left? Not even in here. He'll be here shortly. Well, that would ruin my shtick. We'll hold? Let's hold. We'll start over with Randy if he shows back up. I got one more to give, and he's not in the room. Both of them, I think, out in the hallway. If it's possible. We can go on. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yep. All right, let's skip. We'll go back to Randy when he comes back, and I'll start from the beginning. We can get him in here. The final award we have for this evening, this third final award we have for this evening, would be the Carl Wetzel Award. The Carl Wetzel Award is for lifetime achievement and is one of the party's highest honors. Carl Wetzel was a Libertarian Party activist, candidate, and state treasurer who suffered a heart attack several years ago, leaving no heirs. His $50,000 life insurance policy was split between the National LP and the Missouri LP, while $17K of his 401K had no beneficiaries and went straight to the state. This year, the party presents this award to Bill Boone. Bill Boone is dedicated to the party, is the party and the party's principles. He shows up every event and helps out where he can. He participates in sign waves and flag waves. He has been instrumental in helping candidates in their local party navigate through their campaigns and make sure they have met their legal requirements. Anytime there may have been turmoil in the party, Bill Boone was the rock and held the party together. Bill Boone is someone who doesn't just lip service to liberty or freedom, he exemplifies it. What a love for liberty should look like in Bill Boone. He shows up every opportunity to support and defend liberty. Bill Boone.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah. Good job. Thank you. Appreciate all your help and support. All right, well, I feel bad for Randy. He's been sitting there all day long. Let's see how it goes. I'm going to clean up this laptop. The next item on our agenda is going to be the state committee meeting, which will start after we give Randy his award. If we give Randy his award, we may just have to give it to him later in the day. The state committee meeting, I'm going to have a couple of amendments to this, but this is basically what we're going to do here is we're going to start our roll. We're going to approve the agenda. We're going to go over the May minutes, which you only have in your email. We don't have copies of those here, and then we'll fill vacancies in the state committee. After that, our existing chair will give their reports. Chair and officers will give their reports, give a little information about the state fair. I'm going to talk to you again about Show Me Freedom and how important it is to get data about the electronic Show Me Freedom to Sean to publish on the website. And we'll then have our officer elections. We're going to form our new executive committee, and then on to new business and announcements, and adjourn the state committee meeting. This could take, what I've left out of here and what's not on here, what I meant to say was this was the opportunity at the very beginning of this to propose platform change proposals, or platform changes, thank you. So this state committee meeting can take anywhere from about 40 minutes to 2.5 hours, depending on how heavy the discussions get. And I don't mean to drag it on and out for you, but that's the reality of things. So on our telephone calls, we have these committee meetings, and sometimes they're over in 40 minutes. Sometimes they go on all night. So I'm going to stall here a little bit, maybe take a little break before we start our state committee meeting. I don't know. We just had lunch, time for maybe 10 minutes, and then we'll start back here, and maybe Randy will be here then. Okay, 10 minutes.
3, 4, 5, 1, 2. One, two, three. One, two. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 3, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Check, check. 1, 2, 2. 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Check, check. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 2, 2.
For yours? I think you've already done yours. For your, for, you know,
I'll
for
probably
your,
just repeat it. Yeah.
and you, well, the other thing that you mentioned the possibility of was going through the minute.
Yeah, I didn't have
and
time to
you
do
didn't
that. I
So
didn't have time.
I would say that what would it be? What are the highlights of this past year? I think I kind of got a few of them in mind about who who ran for office last time.
Okay. I can do it. I can do my part.
But I feel like you've already done yours.
A few things. I announced to run for again, and we're looking forward to working with Greg, and we got some great ideas about blah blah blah. No. And we don't have a vice chair here, so that's not going to happen. So okay, Jeff, I'm ready whenever you are. I said that.
The note that I got from Ron, he said that he is still interested, even though he's not here today, of remaining on the state and the executive board. Is there a nomination process that I can do to help make sure his name gets in?
He's in. No,
Okay, I just
we'll figure it out when it comes to a state fair business. Just bring it up. Then. Just make a proposal. Okay. Okay. If you could find your seats again, thank you very much. 10 minutes always turns to 15, and that's not a problem. We've got an afternoon to kill, and I'm trying not to get bored at all. I'm not going to go through again Mike Bozarth and the reason we give Mike Bozarth Award, except that it's only the second time in history that we've given this award. Mike Bozarth was a huge writer and passed several years ago. We miss him terribly. The award's going to Randy Lancaker. What can I say about Randy? But to begin with, he might be able to pronounce his name, which I can never pronounce correctly. Randy is the second person to have received this award other than Bill Wayne, also from Johnson County. It would be much easier and more fun to roast Randy rather than toast him, but I'm truly pleased and have the privilege of honoring Randy with the Mike Bozarth Award for his efforts, past, present, and future, on the Missouri Libertarian Party's social media, Facebook, Twitter, and much, much more. Thank you very much. Randy Lancaker.
Thank you.
Okay, this is going to bring us to a part of our agenda. We've had some discussions in the back of the room. Again, I don't know how long it'll take us to get through the state committee meeting. But when we're finished with this, there's potential that we may have a long break before dinner, and we'll talk about how we're going to manage that break when we get to that point. Kind of stuck on, okay, anyway. I want to call to order the state committee meeting during the 2019 state convention, which is technically our June meeting. The first thing we're going to like the item on the agenda would be to call the roll. So for those of you that are on the state committee or executive committee, can you stand up and make yourself recognized and let Randy record that for us? Greg, you can call those off. Slants is 23. Eric Harris is 13. I have it here. 9. Sean's in 9. Bill Boone is here. He's here. He's in 30. Oh, we haven't got to that point yet to fill. We haven't got to the point to fill yet. Okay, is that the roll? All right, today's agenda is a roll call, which we've just done or we are doing. We're going to then try to approve tonight's agenda, approve the minutes from the May 2019, which you should have in your email, fill the vacancies of the state committee, which we're just calling a roll on right now, reports from our executive officers, platform proposals, state fair report, Show Me Freedom newsletter volunteers. Then we're going to have our officer elections, form the new executive committee, new business announcements, and adjourn the state committee meeting. So is our roll called, Randy? Okay, roll is called. Do I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda? Motion to approve. Cecil, move. Second? Brian? All those in favor? Aye. Against? Thank you. Your email is the only resource we have for the May 2000 minutes. If you haven't read it, I hope you memorized it. And do I have a motion to approve the May 2019 minutes? And who was that? So moved. Bill Boone? Second? Greg? All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Against? Motion passes. All right, our next piece of business is to fill vacancies in the state committee. I have a couple of updates for you right away, Randy. Obviously, Rob Cunningham's no longer in 4. Steve Shaper's no longer in 5. You can probably make these changes yourself. I don't think Ned Kelly's in 8 any longer. Tony Kirk we're just removing from 10, maybe, depending on our elections. So do you know where you are?
I know where we are now.
You know, okay, which district are you in?
15.
Ray Harbert. Yeah, there's room for you there. Okay. So I have a website up here that if you don't know what Senate district you're in, I can plug your home address in. But what we need now people to do is to step up and become part of our state committee. So if you're not part of the state committee, this is the time to volunteer. We need to fill all those vacancies. So we're looking for. If you think you'd like to be in a state committee, let me know. Yes. Yes.
Yes, they did. I'm just trying to confirm what
Yeah, Randy, can we fill those vacancies post-meeting? Do we have to fill them tonight? Because all we're concerned about today is who's going to vote.
What we're doing is having you appoint everybody. Anybody that's new, nobody except for me and Bill got the districts probably.
Okay.
So you're basically just appointing
So,
everybody.
so we got lots of time. Let's get it done. So our business right now is to fill the state committee. Brian.
And I was just curious, the minutes, by the way, apologies, I had this, said 6, and I thought it was like U.S. congressional, or state senate. Or you're calling us what we are, because I mean, on the minutes, it has to be congressional, U.S. congressional. That's the state senate. This is state senate. State senate, okay, so I just wanted to make sure. What's state senate? I am in, as you said, 8, so it's U.S. congressional, District 6, which is what I had to read last week.
He'd fill in for Ned. He would take Ned Kelly's place. That would be Ned Kelly's place.
You know Gus's last name? Tom. Tom. Do you know Gus's last name? Huh? Let me grab my phone before I address the chair.
You think it's appropriate for me to read through this list if people know the
I don't think
status?
we need to. I
Okay.
think we can move on.
Okay. Okay. Yep. Yeah, Tom.
Can you be on the executive committee if you're not on the state committee?
Yes.
Okay, so we're good then.
Okay.
Is there anybody else that is not on the state committee that would like to be?
Anybody else here that would like to be on the state committee, or we can recruit to be on the state committee, or we can persuade you to be on the state committee?
I'm trying to get Robin Dominic, she's looking up her state Senate district right now.
I can do it real fast. I have it up already.
Permission to address the chair?
Sure.
I'd like to recommend or recruit or appoint Gus Typhon 16.
No, that's a vacant. Sorry, which district are you looking for?
16 is fine.
No, the legislator.
What is the first name?
Your address? I'm not going to put that on Facebook Live. But. Last call? Okay. Do we need to redo the roll, Randy, or is it just good where you go? All right, well, thank you for that. I know that sometimes can be a little bit of a crawling kittens moment, but here we are. The next item on the agenda is the officer reports. I'll go first as chair. I'm going to just repeat myself from a few things from this morning. For those of you, of course, who weren't in the room, that'll be the first time you hear it. It's my intention to run for chair later on in this meeting. We have some great plans. Greg and I have some really some in-depth discussions over the last couple of months of some great plans, maybe kind of a revamp of the way we've been thinking about things for the last couple of years. Focusing on proportional representation, focusing on candidate recruitment, focusing on membership drives. Our plan and my plan is also to work closely with Sean to get our contact databases and mailing lists updated to a point where they're going to be effective and useful. And you can count on me to attend every meeting and do the best I can to represent you the best I can. So that would be my intention. Our vice chair is not present. And I was just asked Randy if he has anything he wants to say as secretary.
Nothing new. This is not going to be handled later.
All right, so then our next item on the agenda will be the treasurer's report. That's going to be Sean O'Toole. Sean's going to, we're going to go ahead and make this attempt to plug his laptop into your HDMI cable and see how that works. I think if you set that right on top of here, you'd be good to go. Let's do this. Let's just tape it down. Yeah, when you tear it down, it's going to shut it off. If you put it on top, I'll hold it. Something like this. I hope it's on this side because he's got it all taped in.
Actually, how's he set up there?
Okay.
That's okay. Well, we got it. So anyway, I got it. We got it.
I'll give it a shot.
Perfect. Close.
Try to make it a little bigger, but that's about as big as it gets. It's kind of out of focus. still,
Yeah,
isn't it?
tight, go focus one more time. It was great for a second there. Back. That's as good as it's gonna get
I think
right
that's
there.
about as good as it's going to get.
Sorry for the small numbers. I'd be glad to send this to anybody who wants to have a copy of it. I'll also see if I can't reproduce it and put it on a post on the website as well. What I've done here is I just wanted to give sort of, I've already given an annual report a couple of months back. I gave an annual report for 2018, but I thought I'd just recap it and show it in comparison to a 5-year run as to where we stand. You'll notice that we have candidate filing fees of $2,400 this past year, which is a good year for us. That's wonderful income that we get in the door, and it helps quite a lot. That brought us to a net income for the year of $4,431, which leaves us with money in the bank of $25,262. Now, before it sounds like a lot of money, I want to just mention the fact that if we were to lose ballot access and have to go at that battle ourselves, a state the size of Missouri would cost about $100,000 to get ballot access back in if we paid for signature gathering, just based on other states. We could typically get help from the Libertarian National Committee to the tune of about 50%. So we're about half of the money that we would need to get ourselves out of trouble if that were to happen. The other reason I like to bring this up is because when I started out as treasurer of the party, basically mid to end of 2010, I believe it was, we had about $16,000 in the bank. We were down from a high of 25,000 and change, and with last year's action, we're back up to our $25,000 number, and it's notable because it's taken us a long time to get back down up. Donations are slowly coming back. The biggest issue for us is expenses are down. When I came in, we were still doing a printed Show Me Freedom every year, sometimes two. We maintained a post office box that was difficult to get to because it was in St. Louis, and we didn't have an officer living in St. Louis. We also had expenses for telephone that exceeded $100 a month, server expenses for our website that exceeded $700 a year, and the Libertarian National Committee has made our web services are now entirely covered by the national organization, which helps a lot. I've got our telephone expenses down to $25 a month, and at least for now, we're not going to be doing any more printed Show Me Freedoms. And if we do, we'll probably print them on a small basis and send them to targeted individuals, just because it's, in this day and age, getting people to read things in the form of an email or online is practical and works, and it's just a lot cheaper. All I can say is I appreciate the donations we get in the door. Keeping the lights on is important. While $25,000 looks like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money to the Republicans and Democrats, they end up every year at zero. We don't have we have to keep a cushion because we could need that money. So as far as I'm concerned, $25,000 is zero for us. It's actually negative $25,000. We're half the way to where we need to be. So I don't have any other things to cover specifically. As I said, we've got 25,000, I think it was 25,242 in the bank right now. We are, just for informational purposes, we're about $350 based on the calculations I'm getting from our food vendor, our caterer. We're going to be about $350 short on the convention, which is not terrible. We've done worse on conventions in the past. So thank you, Cecil, for keeping costs under control. But unless there are questions, I don't have anything else to report specifically. Greg, you must have a question. You always do. Come on. Adam.
Yeah, in regards to Sam Goldstein's points earlier about having an executive director at the state level for the party, I understand what you're saying about being at 25,000 and wanting to be at 50, but is
it's a scary thought, but you're probably right. It could probably be revenue positive in the long run if we hired the right person and if they were to take fundraising seriously. There's no doubt that states that have executive directors people specifically in a paid capacity to work specifically on that have seen their donations go up. Texas is a great example of that. I don't know. That's a decision that should be discussed, and we'll see.
Yeah, so I would just, the first thought that occurs to me that I think would be worth considering would be that if you could hire someone and say, we're gonna hire you on a provisional basis for 3 months, and if in 3 months you can become revenue neutral for the state party, then you can stay on as long as, you see what I'm saying, that there's some.
Sure.
And it really depends on if you have the right candidate at the state level who can step up, but I see that's a great opportunity for the state here to level up.
Yeah.
this organization.
Distinctly possible. Thanks. Other comments, questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Leave that for you. So.
I got it. Hopefully. It'll work. Maybe. Yep, there it goes. Look at that. Fantastic. Oh, Sean. Webmaster report. Sorry. Yeah, I thought you were last. But I'm very proud of the web. I think Sean's, just so you all know, Sean has put a tremendous amount of work into our website, and it's evolved. He'll tell you a little bit about where we've come from and how the national website is going to help us out. But the amount of work that Sean has put into it over the last 2 years is just amazing, and he should be a big hand for Sean there.
Thanks. Thank you. We promised it for a long time. It took a long time to deliver it, but the new website, I think, is doing a good job of promoting the party. It looks good. It's mobilely responsive, so that someone on a mobile phone sees the site as clearly as someone coming in on a laptop computer. Right now, we pay no money for our website. It's a service provided by a grant from the Libertarian National Committee. We've got, at last count, Andy Burns, who's the coordinator for the LNC on the project, I think told me that we're now, by the end of this month, going to have 30 states of the 50 on the system, and we really wanted to see it cross halfway before we knew that we'd have something successful. I'm sure some states will stay on their own, and that's just fine, but so far we're very happy with what we have. For the first time ever, we've been able to blend our national data. So when somebody, the circle is now complete, so that if somebody goes to the national website, fills out their name, interested in information on the party or volunteering or running for office or what have you, that used to come in and basically get lost because we'd get it in dribs and drabs and mailings to us, and then it would be up to us to follow through on it and everything else. We still have to follow through, but the nice part is it now works its way into our database automatically, so we can go in and see who those people are as they're coming in. I haven't yet figured out exactly how we're going to set up the triggers so we know they're coming in, but that's something that will get done. Along the same lines, we've been able to now take all of the names. I took recently the last contacts from the last 5 years that came in through the LNC and blended them with our own state announcement list and built a list of about 3,400 people. We've made 3 mailings, all specific to the state convention, to that list of 3,400. And as one might expect, we had some bounces and we had some unsubscribes. The list is now down to just over 3,000. I think it's probably going to fall to a total of about 2,000 by the time we're done, primarily because that LNC list, it's not what I would call a clean list. It's not the list they mail from. It's just simply the input list that comes in to the National LP website. And then they run it through Constant Contact, and they get their bounces cleared out, and they get their unsubscribes and everything else. But we get the list raw and build that in ourselves over time. But we're going to begin some campaigns in the coming months to begin to build up that list and get it bigger. I figure we're probably going to lose 7% every time we put out a mailing just on unsubscribes for the foreseeable future, probably for about another 1,000 members. But we've never been able to get mailings out to everyone across the state of Missouri to the degree that we do now. And Greg and I will be taking advantage of that and in the coming months, and Bill, and attempting to grow the list, grow awareness of the LP, grow awareness of libertarian principles, increasing our donor base, and ideally getting more candidates for public office. So that's, I don't think I have anything else specific on the website, but glad to answer questions. Yes?
I'm rather new to the state at least. I've been a national member for a few years. I didn't even realize I needed to have a state affiliation. And the website it's clean, it's easy to navigate, but I didn't know who any of the officers were until I talked to Randy. There's not a list of who is the chair, and who's the vice chair, and who's at large,
Is it in there?
or anything on the website.
I'm reading from
The
it.
information about this convention.
It's not easy to get to, though.
A month or so ago. I'd heard about it on Facebook, and I've been waiting and harassing people online, like, when can I buy some tickets? I think I was still
Sorry. It took a while to get all of the forms ready and everything to do the online event registration. Sorry about that.
And I prefer everything online. Please don't ever put anything in the mail.
I agree with you. Bill is, I think Bill is saying on the website, you're finding the officers, are you not, Bill? They're in
Yeah.
there somewhere? Yeah.
Yeah. It takes a little work to get into. And it shouldn't. It should not take that kind of work to get into.
And we can probably, we'll continue to refine the website over time and clean up bits and pieces. It's in raw form right now, but it's way better than it used to be. Any other questions? Thank you.
So on that, thank you, Sean. On that drop down who we are, don't click who we are, that'll take you to National LP. Drop it down, there's a little drop down on who we are. You'll get the platform, the principles, the leadership, the elected officers, affiliates, bylaws, and how to contact us. So just drop that down on your thing. It's who we are. Our next item on the agenda is a report from our Executive Director, Greg Talapik.
I am the first and the only executive director the Missouri Libertarian Party has ever had. Sally was asking this earlier, and it caused me to review the chairman for whom I have served. This is not, the executive director spot is not an elected position. It is basically someone that the state chair can appoint with the approval. At least that's how it happened in my case in 2000 when I first became the executive director under Chairman Bob Sulentrup. Since then, we've had Glenn Nielsen, Sissy Spraggins, and now Bill Slants. I think those are all the chairs since I was made the executive director in 2000. It started out for about a year and a half, I think. I was writing myself a check for $300 a month until I got to the point where I realized I was not contributing $300 a month in effort. And after about a year and a half, and I've worked it on and off with some degree of effort ever since, but not worthy of paying myself. So I've been volunteer ever since about 2001 and a half, and I'm 61 and a half now. This is a state committee meeting as opposed to an executive committee meeting, and just to review, the state committee is authorized by state statute. Each established political party is supposed to have a state committee which speaks for the party, and I think that the two major parties and we have appointed an executive committee to handle our day-to-day business. Whenever the state committee is not handling business, we are the state committee today. The last meeting that the state committee had was the Saturday before the filing period began in last year, 2018. And that was the first time that we ever did our embedded nominating convention. Whenever we nominated our state Senate candidate, Japheth Campbell, and our state auditor candidate, Sean O'Toole. First time we used that process. We will use that process again this will be the second time only, and that meeting will be February the 22nd of next year. But we will have many more offices. We set it up so that we have the opportunity, but not the obligation, to nominate all of our statewide candidates at convention. And that's all the details are in the bylaws in regards to nominating convention. And it's not universally approved of. It did pass, and it can be changed. But I would like to see us try it again. Numbers. We have been running pretty steady at about 250 dues-paying members living in Missouri, contributing annually to the National Libertarian Party. And that number has been fairly constant for several years now. Another number, I just finished submitting to the Secretary of State's office our submission for the official manual of the state of Missouri, which is published biennially. The next issue is for the 2019-2020, they call it the Blue Book. And we will have 19 counties listed in there, which is down from a high of about 41 counties at about the turn of the century. As far as I know, we have one elected city councilman, nonpartisan, in Chesterfield, I think it is. How do you say his name, Mike? Ismain? And I just learned 2 days ago that we have a county health board. The guy who was here, this Wally Bragg, who Tom Roulette basically rounded up in Perry County. I did not realize they elect their county health board on a partisan ticket. I was not aware of it, but he ran before. I think he really was on board with the Libertarian Party, and I think he ran as an independent. The party was formed in 1971. We were established as a political party in Missouri. We've maintained an established party status since 1992. So basically, we've been a political party for about a half a century, and we've just passed the quarter century mark as an established party in Missouri. And so far in Missouri, in this quarter of a century, we've elected one person on the Libertarian Party ticket. That was, actually we didn't elect him. He got himself elected to mayor of Chillicothe, which as far as I know is the only city in Missouri which has a partisan city council race. So beating that drum again, I'll keep it short here. I could be wrong, but I don't think it's going to happen any other way. It's proportional representation as far as getting libertarians elected, and to continue to get us elected year after year after year, and not just as a fluke, somebody who has already got a name for themselves, or someone who switched parties after they got elected as a major party candidate. The competing vision has been offered here as to how we're going to get libertarians elected to state legislatures. The competing vision basically is the farm team method. You get find good people, get them running for city council and all these nonpartisan races, and they build a name for themselves and they work themselves up in the state legislature. But the single seat district method of electing people just is not conducive to third parties. I mean, it's single seat district elections generate two-party systems. So if we're going to get libertarian elections, we're just going to have proportional representation, I think. I mean, we can continue to educate in the meantime, and I could be wrong. It could be if we keep at this long enough, maybe after a century, we'll start electing libertarians. I don't know. I'm being a little bit sardonic there. And what steps do we need to take? I think probably what we need to do now is we need to begin to build coalitions with some of the other third parties. And when I ran for Congress in 1994, I got a survey back from one of the universities of California. There are 34 political parties in the United States at that time. There are lots of other people besides Republicans and Democrats who would like to have representation on our legislative bodies. It's not just us and the Constitution and the Greens and the reforms and natural laws. There's many of them. And people like Winston Apple, the Democrat. And fair-minded people in general. Let's see. So I think that is it. Let's see. I did want to recap that we did have, the last meeting of this organization, or the state committee, was just prior to the filing period. Well, so we had the filing period, and about 29, 30 people filed. By the time general election came around, there were 27 Libertarians on the ballot in Missouri, and every single Missourian had at least 3 Libertarians to vote for. And Sean O'Toole, we have to thank for exceeding our 2% threshold in a statewide race to maintain our ballot access. The Constitution Party did the same in the state auditor's race also. The Green Party did not meet the threshold, though we will all, 3 of us, third parties, be on the ballot in 2020. The Greens, their continued ballot status, it will be on the line in the 2020 elections. There are at least 27,000 really strong Libertarians in Missouri, because that's the number of people who voted for Japheth Campbell in the U.S. Senate race that was so hotly contested, Claire McCaskill, versus the guy who won, whose name I'm not even going to say. I'm not going to give them credit. And let's see, in that U.S. Senate race, 75,000 people voted for somebody besides a Republican or Democrat. So there's lots of people who don't want Republicans and Democrats. It's not a large percentage, but it is a lot of people. There's 75,000 people. I think we have what it takes. And in the meantime, we can continue to go ahead and affect public policy. I think we are affecting public policy. The medical marijuana passed in the 2018 election, and that was no small feat. And it was, furthermore, it was the stripe of it that we endorsed as the state party when there were 3 on the ballot, I think it was. And Illinois just recently passed recreational marijuana. I think it might still be sitting on the governor's desk, but he has declared his intention to sign it. And if we start talking about other things that are important to us, we will find that we will affect public policy there too. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, thank you, Greg. All right, next item on the agenda would be to hear from you for platform change proposals. So the floor is open for a platform change proposal, which is our obligation to you every time we meet like this. If you have a platform change proposal, please address the mic in the center there and make your proposal. All right. Hearing none, we'll move on. Makes my job so much easier. Not to mention that hammer out a platform change is. So our next item on the agenda is the state fair, and I'm going to have Brian come up here, maybe just talk a little bit about the state fair a little bit. Our state fair coordinator, chairman, is Ron Bream. Couldn't be here today. But the state fair is a sizable investment we make every year. It's a good profile. We are in a great location on the boulevard at the state fair, and it's a fun day if you want to go out there and work. I know I've worked out there with Bill Boone. I've worked out there with Bill Wayne, and many of you. And it's fun to be out there for the day. We get some shade in the afternoon with a big tree, and I highly recommend that you spend half a day or even a whole day out there if you can, and work the crowd. The rest of the parties are there. They're all working it, and we need volunteers. We're there for 10 days, and we need 20 shifts. 20 shifts filled. You can fill 1, 2, 3, or all 20 if you want to. I'm going to leave it over to Brian.
So again, my name is Brad Eichstead. I'm covering for Ron Bream. As he said, he's out attending his nephew's graduation party out in South Carolina. So Ron had asked me to go ahead and help talk a little bit about the state fair. As Bill has said, the state fair is a great opportunity for the Missouri Libertarian Party. It gives us essentially 3 key items. 1, it is one of our major outreach opportunities outside of actually running candidates. 2, it's a chance for us as individual libertarians to have a chance to interact and improve our message as we communicate libertarianism to other people. Where else do people typically come up to you? You get a chance to talk to them. You can practice and refine your message. If it fails with one person, well, guess what? There's another one that's going to be coming up. Gives you a chance to do it over and over and over again. And third, and probably most important from what we've seen today, is, as John Phillips said, this is our opportunity to partner and build coalitions with other like-minded organizations. Bill had mentioned about the medical marijuana. 2 years ago, that was one of the items that we had, that we were partnering with the Medical Marijuana Initiative to get ballot access for that amendment. We were a part of what was helping get that successfully onto the ballot in Missouri, and now we have medical marijuana here in Missouri. We have other opportunities we've heard about today, whether it's STOP, whether it's the petition around proportional representation, which I helped run as a candidate before. We have ranked choice voting and other opportunities. So I would encourage us, and you as individuals, I handed out some different cards from Ron. If you have a chance to get down, even if it's not for all day, if it's a partial day, for a couple of hours, show up. Even if somebody's already scheduled, if you can show up, it's always nice to have another Libertarian, because sometimes you get multiple people there, and having multiple Libertarians makes it easier to talk to folks. Now, I know not everybody is outgoing. You know, most people that know me know I'm a pretty shy guy, right? Well, not really. But a lot of people out there aren't as eager to go out. So what I thought this year, we have a primary theme, thanks to Greg Slopick. We're looking at Tweedledee and Tweedledar. Basically, there's not a dime's worth of difference between the Tweedledee and Tweedledars that are out there. And I know from what Greg has indicated, Ron's got some signage and some other things to help with that. If we have opportunities to have petitions and other items to bring it in, that will help. But I thought we might add one other item, and this is something I adapted from my campaign, and I call it the Libertarian Wheel of Liberty. And it's very simply a chance to go ahead. I purchased a number of different items here. We have our Liberty Bell, we have the Bill of Rights, we have an eagle, we have other symbols of United States patriotism and our freedoms. And basically just running it around. I know it sounds maybe a little annoying here, but when you're on the fairgrounds, you want that sound to get out there. And just saying, hey, you know, come up and spin the wheel of liberty. When you spin with liberty, you're always going to win. You're always going to get a little prize. So very simple. Again, I've basically purchased some of the different items on here. If anybody would like to donate any item to essentially be, you know, maybe a set of something that's out there, we can subdivide these out even a little bit further. But I thought this is something, you don't even have to talk. And I've done this at different groups. Just doing this, that sound is going to go ahead and draw people in. So I would encourage you, we're going to try this out, see how it works to bring folks with that. With that, again, I thank you for your opportunity to address you this afternoon. Ron and I would be happy to take your applications to help out with the state fair. As I said, I've got his cards and contact information. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks, Brian. Here's your cards. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Brian. Yeah, the state fair, we've made a commitment to it. A couple of years ago, I wasn't so enthusiastic about it, and I've been convinced that it's the right place to be, right thing to do, and it's really a little expensive for us, but not unworth it. It's definitely worth it. Next item on the agenda, and I'm repeating myself. Yes, Cecil.
County Libertarian Party and the Missouri Libertarian Party have teamed up to do the Ozark Empire Fair here in Greene County. So we do need some people to step forward to help out with that, and we are going to be up in Sedalia helping out with the state.
Okay. Thank you, Cecil. Moving on to the next item, I've already kind of addressed this morning. I don't know who's here this morning and heard it or not this. So, and Sean talked about this a little bit. And so we had the newsletter, the Show Me Freedom newsletter, which we're probably not going to publish again unless we really feel a need or somebody really makes a motion for that in its paper form. I think we're going to move that to an electronic format. And so, again, we're looking for editor and content. So we need maybe a Show Me Freedom editor, somebody to volunteer who can, once they receive content, could provide content, but also when they receive content, can proof it, make sure it looks good, make sure it makes sense, edit it, ship it off to Sean. Sean can get it published on the website, or even Greg at this point, and matter of fact, myself. So one of the three of us can get it onto the website in an appropriate place. We're not going to open the website up to just everybody. That would cause chaos. So Show Me Freedom newsletter is going to be electronic from now on, unless we feel passionate about it one other way. And content. Anything that's going on, as Cecil just mentioned, a county fair here or something like this, a little write-up of that. Anything that's the petitions that may be going on, the people are interested in legislation that's going on, the people are interested, positions that we have on those. Those are all could be part of the front page of our website and front page of our Show Me Freedom newsletter. All right, enough said. Next item on our agenda is the officer reports, or officer elections. We normally do this by secret ballot. Is that right? Have a nomination secret ballot, or just yes?
Unless we have more than one candidate running for the same office, we just do it by raise of hands. So unless somebody runs against one of us, which everybody's welcome to do.
Thanks for the clarification. So the first position that's available for officer elections, of course, would be the chair. And I'm running for chair. Yes, Greg.
I nominate.
Oh, Greg second. Brian second. Greg first. Greg second. Sean third. Any other nominations for chair? All right, all those in favor of me being chair, please indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Well, thank you very much. I'll do my best. Try not to let you down, and we'll move on from there. We now need a vice chair, and go ahead, Randy.
I nominate Cecil Ince.
We have a nomination for Cecil Ince to be vice chair. Second? Second, Brian Eichstead. I'm sorry, Brad. I'll get it right. I've called you Brian all day, haven't I? I don't even know your last name now. Anyone else running for vice chair? Noda. All those in favor of Cecil Ince being our new vice chair, I'll indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Vice Chair, Cecil Ince. Thank you very much. Next officer would be for secretary. Bill Wayne nominates Randy Lonkaker with a prayer. Bill Boone has a second on that. Any other secretaries? We're not going to let you. We're not going to let you not accept. So, all those in favor, Randy Lonkaker. Opposed? Congratulations, Randy. 2 more years. I don't know what happened there. Executive Director Greg Tlapik, would you mind serving as Executive Director for another couple of years? I skipped right over the finance guy. Easy to miss. All right, yeah, we'll come back to that in a second. So we need a treasurer. Please, we need a nomination for treasurer.
I nominate Sean O'Toole. I'll second.
I didn't see the second. Yeah. Thanks, Brian. Nominated by Cecil, seconded by Brad. You'll sell me on it. Confused enough. It's a long day. Any other nominations for treasurer? All those in favor of Sean O'Toole being treasurer for another 2 years, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Thank you, Sean. See you in 2 years. Greg Talapik, will you accept my appointment as executive director for the next 2 years? Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Or thank you, Sean, and thank you, Greg. Webmaster is not really an officer report. Is it an officer, webmaster? Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah. It's appointed by a chair. Yeah. But not even an officer. It's just here as a report kind of officer. Sorry about that. He's already an officer. He doesn't get 2 votes. Okay. So that is our officer elections. It's now the next item on our agenda is to form our executive committee. Okay, I've been corrected. So we'll throw that last. New business. Mike. No, that Mike. Mike Lewis.
In a discussion with some of our St. Louis County members, it's become aware to me anyway that, and many of the others knew, that there's a severe inability to log into the phone system that we're currently using for the executive committee meetings, depending on the platform and your vendor and that sort of thing. Nick and others have several other suggestions of systems that we could tap into that aren't dependent on the compliance of your particular vendor. And even Greg has pointed out the fact that he can't do it on one system but has to do it on his mobile phone. So we'd like to propose that the committee switch systems.
Come up with conference calling somehow.
That people can tap into. Mm-hmm. The other issue is that it seems like notification about the meeting and the phone number going out is inconsistent. I've got a notification about a third of the time in the last year, and so we need to be more careful about that too.
Good idea. Good points. I do know that the freeconferencecall.com that we were using had changed their contact number without notifying us. So that there's probably a couple of notices came out from me without that updated telephone number, and we'll work on that. It's a great idea, Mike, that we have a more.
Issues with advertising agreements and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's at least one system that Nick proposed. It's like all of $15 a month that opens up a platform for anybody to log into from a variety of devices.
Yeah, that sounds like a wonderful idea. I think we should research that. It'd be a lot easier than getting, we could run a conference call, through a cell phone network. I don't think anybody's using anything but I don't think anybody uses landlines anymore, but I don't know. Thank you, Mike. We'll make a note of that. Changing any other new business. Yes, Jeff.
If anybody wants to get a hold of me, I do a lot of video and telephone conferencing for my business. I can kind of give you an overview of what's available systems.
Providing assistance from Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. New business. Yes, Brian.
So I had talked earlier as regards to the state convention and the opportunities that we have there. I would like to make a motion for the committee to approve for Ron Bream to accept opportunities to partner with some of the groups that we've heard here today, specifically 3 groups, Gary Nolan's Stop petition, the petition from Winston Apple as regards to the proportional representation, and also from Larry Bradley around ranked choice voting, that we essentially support and have a coalition at the state party, or sorry, at the state fair, similar to what we did successfully for the marijuana legalization opportunity we did a couple of years ago. Thank you.
Okay, is that the form of a motion?
That is a form, yes.
Asking for a blessing.
I would like to make a motion that the executive committee approve that Ron Bream accept and work with these 3 groups to go ahead and arrange for the state state fair to partner with them. Okay, so I need to wait until after the executive committee first. Which would be which is the appropriate, if I may ask, point of inquiry then?
I'll tell you, what we could do is we'll form the executive committee, and then we'll add that item just after. Well, we have an executive committee here that's, it's kind of in limbo right now. Yeah.
Okay, so if I need to wait, that's fine.
I think it's safe. I think it's safe to give Ron his green light, and we'll revoke that from your proposal. We'll revoke that at the next meeting if we feel appropriate. So,
okay,
feel free to give Ron all the data all the power he needs, and we'll. He's not going to abuse that, so we know
okay,
Ron.
I will go ahead and relay that on to him. Thank you very
perfect.
much.
Thank you, Brad. Announcements. Oh, I'm sorry. Continue with new business. Okay, next item on the agenda would be the announcements. Do we have any announcements? This would be appropriate time for, here we go. Champion of Freedom Award winner, Tom Roulette.
Just really quick. It was said earlier today that there's only been like one Libertarian legislator elected. There have been 10, and of those 10, 3 of them have been reelected. And it was a while ago, but there's certainly been more than one in the Libertarian Party's history. And that's only, those 10 are only the ones who have had a majority of their votes come from the Libertarian line. Some of them are fusion votes. That's not counting the one that are fusion and they're a Libertarian, but they got more votes on the Republican line. If you do it that way, there's even more.
Thank you, Tom. Additional new business? Excuse me, additional new business. Okay, takes us to the next item on our agenda would be the announcements. Any announcements? Green Party announcements? All right. Seeing no announcements, friendly amendment to the tonight's agenda. The next item on the agenda will be now to form the executive committee. This will be the last item on the agenda. Please.
This is by congressional district. One person from each district, please come up and get a piece of paper. And the person that does that is the person with the very neatest handwriting for each group. And list who you choose. And we need 2 regular members, 2 alternate members. If you have more than 4 people in your group that want to be on the committee, we will happily find another place for them. So let us know you have an extra, because we'll have lots of openings left over. And when you get done, bring me back the piece of paper so that we can do that. And if anybody wants to see who was on the list last year, come up and look at my list from last year. And it should be on the website also.
That's right, we caucus for this, right?
The
We
what?
caucus to 8 tables?
Yeah,
So we caucus this for 8 tables. I'm going to recommend that we do the 3 tables that are coming right, they're occupied now, the 2 tables in the center. That's 5, and the 3 tables starting with Sean, coming over to Mike Lewis, and over here to Tom Roulette. So we're going to caucus to those tables. Those are the 8 congressional districts. And if you don't mind me doing it like a baseball metaphor, we'll do it like baseball. We'll make this table here with the, Mike Lewis, you're in 1, right?
Not anymore.
You're in 2?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll start over here with Tom Roulette. Tom's table is going to be district number 1. Mike Lewis will be number 2. Sean is number 3. Brad is number 4. No, Brad's table is number 4. Yeah. Bill Boone's table will be number 5. The corner table in the back is number 6. This table here with all the good-looking people is number 7. And then this vacant table up here with the flowers will be number 8. Okay, I'm in 2, so I'm going to go down there. Be back in a minute. state money? Ask Sean. Ask Sean. I don't know. I don't know the answer. Sean would know. He does all the MEC reporting. No. I'd take Tony off. Yeah, that's what I would do. Yeah, I'm good. You got it. Okay. Are you announcing these or just let it go as is? You announce these or is business over? You got what you need? Okay. Okay, we're pretty close here to finishing up our state committee meeting. Thank you all for getting that job done. We didn't have anybody here for the third. We're going to. I'll work on that with the executive committee a little bit later on in the month, or get people delegated there. We're going to pull some people out that haven't been participating, but we'll get some people who are willing to do that work. That brings us to the conclusion of today's state committee meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Eric? So moved.
Second.
Cecil, second. All those in favor of adjourning today's meeting, state committee meeting? Aye. Opposed? Opposed? Please don't leave. All right, a little bit of convention business now. It's early. We did that pretty early. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the next event is dinner. Starts at 6. So we have 3 hours. We have, if you see a couple of people, the vendors that have been here, pretty quiet all day long. And so before you leave the room, I've invited them to come up and tell us a little bit about why they're here. So this is the Convention of States, the Better Ballot, and Missouri Cannabis Reform. 2 or 3 minutes, each one is going to come up and kind of talk to you about why they're here. And then we'll adjourn. We're going to break, after the last speaker comes up, we're going to break until 6 p.m., make it about 5:45, break till 6 p.m., and continue with dinner and our presidential forum. So, Convention of States, if you have a spokesperson that would like to come over. I can get rid of this. Maybe I can get rid of this. Maybe I can't. I can do it that way. Good man. Well,
thank you all. Appreciate you having us here and letting us participate in your event and the opportunity to speak with you. And obviously, well, first of all, my name is Brett Sturley. I'm the Missouri State Director for the Convention of States Project. We're a grassroots effort to teach the Constitution and try to restore the principles of federalism. And I think, we're all here for the same purpose. We're all unhappy with the way that government is working. Don't feel that any of the two major political parties are really are representing us, representing our interests effectively. And so we all have different, solutions to the problem. And what our solution is found in Article 5 of the Constitution. And in Article 5, that has the lays out the process by where the Constitution can be amended. Obviously, it's been amended 27 times by Congress, proposing an amendment, going to the floor, having 2/3 of both chambers of the House and Senate approve that or pass that proposal. That proposal then goes on to the states, and to where it takes 38 states currently, three-quarters of the states, to actually ratify any type of proposal, and only at that point is the Constitution amended. Like I said, that's been done 27 times. Our organization advocates for the second mode of proposing amendments to the Constitution, which goes through the people working through their state legislators. And so, actually, in Article 5, the state legislatures, each state has co-equal authority to make proposals and propose amendments to the states as a whole to make changes to the Constitution. And this originated from in the Constitutional Convention of 1787. 3 days before it adjourned on September 15th, Colonel George Mason arose to address the delegates, and this isn't a verbatim account, but it gets a point across. He said, "Hey, look, guys, we have been talking since May about how to structure a governmental system that keeps the federal government from being able to infringe on individual rights, individual liberty. We have a flawed document because we have given the only way to change this document for reasons, for events that come over experience, or as the union grows. The only entity that can make proposals right now, or propose changes, is Congress. So are we so naive to think that a government that's become tyrannical will take steps to restrain their own tyranny? So we have to give the people in the states a way to propose changes to the Constitution for things that they might want to see, but the federal government is not in their interests. And so that's exactly where we see ourselves right now. I mean, for decades, it's been agreed across the political spectrum from coast to coast that the federal government does too much, they spend too much, and they stay there too long. And it's also pretty well universally agreed to that D.C. will never, ever take any steps to restrain their own spending authority, to restrain their own authority to make decisions, or to send themselves home, or do any type of rotation in office, as Thomas Jefferson spoke about. So that leaves it to the states and the state legislatures to do this. Specifically, there's several Article 5 movements out there for all different types of proposals. Specifically, the Convention of States Project, our resolution, which has passed 15 states. We have to pass 34 states to reach that 34 state threshold. We passed 15 states so far, Missouri in 2017. What our resolution allows to be discussed at this interstate meeting of state commissioners are proposals to limit the size and scope and jurisdiction of the federal government, discuss term limits for federal officials, and restore fiscal restraints. It addresses each of those areas to where DC is doing too much, spending too much, and staying there too long. So this is a grassroots-led effort. We have just shy of 4 million supporters nationwide. We have volunteers like myself and our Veterans Coalition Director, Tim Rickey, that was over at our table helping today. So this is something to where it's really the enforcement mechanism of the 10th Amendment. If you know, the 10th Amendment says any states there aren't any rights or authority that's not specifically given to the federal government in the 10th Amendment, in the Constitution, is then reserved to the states and the people. So, that kind of lays out the principle of how federalism should work, where the authority should work, that there's only enumerated powers that the federal government can enact. Then everything else is reserved to the states. But there's no penalty mechanism. There's no enforcement mechanism. The two mechanisms that were in the Constitution were the state legislatures selecting their senators to serve in Washington, D.C. That was supposed to be the state's voice in Washington, D.C. Then the second mode is through the Convention of States process. So really, I think that our group's goals and the Libertarian Party's goal and platform, we want to restore the principles of federalism, and we want to return decision-making authority back to the states and back to the local level to where it belongs. We think whether you're a representative in inner city St. Louis or in Cape Girardeau, it's our position is that you are a better, you know better what your community needs than some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C., some a politician that maybe we elect, but again, that's one of the reasons why we're here, because we don't feel that our views are being adequately advocated for in Washington, D.C. So what is needed is a structural change. The structure itself is broken. If you think that, we've all studied the separation of powers in civics class. For those of us who had the privilege of having civics class, that's not widespread anymore. So we understand the separation of powers between the executive, judicial, and legislative branches. But what is more important, another layer deep, is that vertical axis of the authority, governing authority residing with the people then delegate a portion of that authority to the states delegate a portion of that authority to the federal government. That vertical axis has been totally destroyed. So that's what has to be that's what has to be restored, and until that's restored, we're going to continue to get bad public policy, because you have people, we have the wrong people making decisions about the wrong things in the wrong places. They're making decisions in Washington, D.C. that they don't have any constitutional authority to make. So that's what our goal is education about our founding principles, about the Constitution, and advocating to encouraging our legislators to pass this resolution so we can have this interstate meeting that has been a rich tradition throughout our history, to where the states would get together and they would make decisions about how the states would function and different types of regional interests. We need to do this on a national basis to restore that vertical axis of authority coming from the people to the federal government. So that's kind of briefly what we're about. I'm happy to entertain any kind of questions that you might have. Yes, sir.
So what you're after is specific issues, or so what specifically are as far as the spending stuff like that? Can you go a little bit more into detail as far as what actually is being proposed?
Sure.
For different states to get them to sign on?
Sure, absolutely, and excellent question. If you look, we've never had a convention of states held under Article 5 in our history. There have been state legislatures that have passed over 400 applications to hold a convention of states meeting under Article 5. The problem is that there haven't been 34 of those applications that have agreed to what the purpose of that meeting is. The reason being is that to this point, they've all focused on a predetermined, pre-worded amendment that somebody has come up with and drafted and tried to get through 34 states. Well, what ends up happening is, Missouri might look at this and say, okay, we like this as is, we'll pass it. Kansas will look at it, well, we like this, but we're going to change X, Y, and Z. Eventually, you get like the party game where you have 30 people, you tell somebody that, Billy has a paper cut on his finger, and by the time the story gets to the other end of the line, he has to have his right leg amputated or something, So you don't end up with those 34 applications agreeing with each other. So the approach that we've decided to take is to look at, what are the problems? Too much spending, co-opting of authority in Washington, D.C., and career politicians. And let's focus on that subject matter. And then so let's design the agenda of the interstate meeting around those subject matter areas, and then the states can select their commissioners to go there and represent the state's interests, and then they can just work just like they do in Jefferson City, just like they do in Austin, Texas. They work in a deliberative body through the legislative process to where proposals will be brought to the floor, they'll be assigned a committee, they'll be amended in committee, they'll be voted out of committee, they'll come back to the committee of the whole, amended and debated some more, and then either pass or fail coming out of the convention. The convention itself is powerless. Anything that would be passed out of an Article 5 Convention of States meeting isn't worth the paper it's written on until 38 states agree to that proposal. And then at that point, that's what the true enforcement mechanism is. So what we're focusing on subject matter areas. Now specifically with scope and jurisdiction in that area, that's really focused at the bureaucratic state. That's been expanded by the courts under just an expansion of the Commerce Clause and the General Welfare Clause that have just basically given the federal government the ability to regulate or tax anything that moves, doesn't move. If it doesn't move, they can subsidize it. If it does move, they can tax it. So, the General Welfare Clause and the Commerce Clause are are very short, but they have been expanded by court decisions. So a restatement of saying, hey, regulating interstate commerce, that means the framers meant to make regular the transfer of goods and services across state lines. It doesn't mean that you have to have a regulation on everything, every type of commerce. For term limits, there are several proposals that could be offered under term limits. There could be like a hard and fast term limit like what Missouri has in the State House. Personally, what I would like to see is I would like to see a return to the principle of rotation in office, that maybe you have somebody can serve a 12-year segment in Washington, D.C., either in the Senate or the House, and at that point, after that, they have to set out an election cycle. If they want to rerun for the House, they have to set out 2 years. If they want to rerun for the Senate, they have to sit out for 6 years. That does a couple things. It gets new blood to churn through the legislature to where people don't become entrenched and have that power of incumbency to where other candidates are powerless to actually break through that. The second thing is that it could change their psyche when they're actually drafting legislation, because they're thinking like, okay, I'm going to have to go back home. I'm going to have to live under this for 2 or 6 years. So maybe I can't exempt myself out of all these laws. I'm going to have to live under them. So maybe that changes the psyche. We actually get a little bit better public policy. And as far as like fiscal restraints, you could have, a balanced budget amendment could be discussed under that. Abolition of the 16th Amendment could be discussed under that. It might take a supermajority of state legislatures to approve any type of increase in the federal debt limit, to where the federal government just can't increase their spending cap on their credit card, at will. So those are some different things, but those will all be proposals that we would discuss within that that deliberative process at the convention.
That's the limit of the scope of it?
That is correct. Yes.
My concern is, from initially looking at it, you could eventually do a Pandora's box of that may not go the way that you actually intended it to go. So it's good to hear it's actually a limitation on that. But would it be fair to say that this is more of a state versus federal fight rather than a individual versus the federal fight?
Well, it's the individual. The purpose of the Article 5 Convention of States process is the individuals working. I mean, the individuals we cannot have redress with the federal government per se on the level that's needed. So we have to work through the state legislatures. The reason why the states are involved is the states created the federal government. So ultimately, the states acting together have more power, have more constitutional power than the federal government. So we just need to re-establish that relationship to where the states are the parent and the federal government is the child.
So you say that the convention of states would be limited to the topics. What's the enforcement mechanism to ensure that happens?
Sure. Okay, sure, absolutely. First is historical precedent. We've had several interstate conventions, interstate meetings for all types of regional interests throughout our history. They have all abided by simple rules that anything that's discussed outside the scope of the agenda, that is actually the commission calling. The commission, the application that's passed is also the authority of the Convention of States, so of that interstate convention. So anything outside of that would be called out of order. It's always been one state, one vote. The state legislatures always select their commissioners and who represents them. They have the ability to recall them. In Missouri, will be discussing our faithful commissioner law. Actually, they're setting forward the process of selecting commissioners to an Article 5 meeting. So, this is going to be, I think this is going to be the greatest exhibition of self-government in our lifetimes, whenever we have the first of several convention of states. So all eyes are going to be upon it, and anything that is discussed outside the bounds of that meeting, of that agenda, is going to be out of order, and the votes are going to be null and void.
I guess that is my second question.
Yes.
If you talk about precedent, the single best precedent that would say we would have at the national level for organization states were the delegates that were selected to amend the Articles of Confederation, not completely replace them. I think they went quite a bit beyond their original charter, and that didn't get stopped. Now, maybe we have a little bit more visibility today, but when you talk about precedent of the past, that's the single best precedent we have for an organization of states amending at a federal level. How would you contain it? It wasn't contained then.
Well, actually, if you, and that's a good point, and I hear this a lot. It's helpful to go back and read the commissions that the delegates to the Constitutional Convention were given by their state legislatures. And the outgrowth of this is from the Annapolis Convention back in 1786, where they were mainly looking at commerce issues. They had 7 states together, and they quickly realized what they needed more people there. They needed all the states involved. So that's why the Constitutional Convention of 1787 was called in May from Philadelphia. If you read the commissions that were given from the state legislatures to their delegates, it specifically says there are only Massachusetts and New York even mention the Articles of Confederation. The other 11 commissions say that you're going to give them more expanded powers to draft a constitution sufficient to the exigencies of the Union. So the instructions that the delegates were given is you go draft a constitution that works. They did not mention the Articles of Confederation. Massachusetts did, and so did New York. The New York delegation broke apart. Only Alexander Hamilton stayed behind. Okay, and so and then the Massachusetts, the state legislature voted and made the decision that, hey, you know what, we were wrong. We really need to have our delegates have this expanded authority because the Articles of Confederation were insufficient. So every single delegate there abided by their commission, by their instructions that were given to them by their state legislatures. So the 1787 convention, the delegates 100% followed exactly what their instructions were, and they were to draft a constitution sufficient to the exigencies of the Union. And just a reading of the specific instructions that they were given has that specific language there. Now, what a lot of people will say is they'll say, well, Congress said on February 21st in 1787 that, yeah, we're going to call this convention, this Constitutional Convention, to amend the Articles of Confederation. Well, prior to that point, 7 states have already passed their application. They had already said, we're going to have this meeting in May, and it is to draft, as I said, to draft a constitution sufficient to the exigencies of the Union and give the delegates a greater expanded power than what they had at the Annapolis Convention. So the congressional resolution wasn't even addressed to the states, wasn't an instruction to the states. It was more like a Me Too type thing, like, okay, yeah, we agree with that, but you know what, the process has already been been put in motion by the states. The states controlled the process. Congress had no role other than ministerial role. And if anything else, I know we're out of time. Anything else, just please feel free to catch me over here at the table. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay, now a few words from Better Ballot.
Try to be brief here. First thing I always, whenever I speak to a group, the first thing I always try to say is that I'm not here to change the team you root for, especially in a situation like this when you talk about political topics. What I'm here to talk about always is about the way we choose the team that represents us, okay? I have a pretty good life right now, and the reason I have the life I have today is because I have a gift, and that gift was to recognize the flaws in an organizational structure and to find the solutions and make those solutions work within that organization. And I see that same opportunity for us with the way we run our elections. I often say we have the behavior and the outcomes we have from elected officials because of the way we elect them. We will continue to have those behaviors and outcomes so long as we continue to use the processes we use today. If we want different outcomes and behaviors, then we have to change the way that we elect these people. You've already heard from Winston. Winston and I are not opposed, okay? It is not a matter of proportional representation or ranked choice voting, okay? It's a matter of both. You need proportional representation for representative offices, and you need ranked choice voting for executive offices. And the reason for that is that you then get rid of the spoiler scenario. I do talks on election reform with my 3 proposals. You see on my card there, you have my website. You can go and look and see my 3 proposals. The thing is, I do talks for colleges and universities, and last fall I did one where I got a new perspective on it. I've always endorsed ranked choice voting in the other proposals from the standpoint of effectiveness and efficiency, but I got a new perspective last fall, and that perspective came this way. Is when I finished my talk, the professor who was in charge of the group that I was speaking to said to me that in a trial by jury, there are 2 forms of justice. One is the verdict, and one is the process by which the verdict was arrived at. And if the process is unjust, then the verdict is unjust. And she said, what you're doing is you're showing us that the process we use for elections is unjust. And because it is, people recognize that it's unjust, we're contributing to a sense of illegitimacy with our government. So to restore legitimacy in government, we need to change the way we do our elections. I'll just say this and kind of finish with this and then let you have ask any questions you'd like to ask of me, is there's a corollary to Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law being, of course, that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Well, the corollary is that before you do anything, you have to do something else first. And I would say to all of you here today, if you really want to have an impact, if you want to have elected offices and have the ability to set policy, write laws, approve budgets, and appoint judges, then the first thing you need to do is to fix it so you can get elected. And the current ballot we're using is keeping you from being competitive in the election marketplace. Ranked choice voting combined with proportional representation will make you competitive. It'll take away the spoiler scenario. People will fully consider your party's candidates for office. So with that, thank you very much for letting me be here today. I've enjoyed listening to the speakers and everything that's here. What questions, if any, do you have?
Thanks, Larry. Right. If you're not aware, the state of Maine has gone to ranked choice voting for every office except governor, which is kind of a weird thing because it was their governor that caused them to really go after this thing in the first place. But they have a constitutional
thing. There's a big story behind that I could tell you about. But Maine is using ranked choice voting. They've had to overcome significant opposition to it. And why do they have that opposition? Because they've had the opposition because there's one party in particular that knows that if you go to ranked choice voting and you require majority winners, that plurality winners are no longer acceptable, then they will never win another election because they're unwilling to compromise on their policy, okay? But Maine has shown us the way. There are several cities that use ranked choice voting for the mayoral elections. Winston stated today, and you can see it, I've got a copy of it over there at the desk. I just had an op-ed published in the Kansas City Star regarding the Kansas City election and how much better that election would be if we were using ranked choice voting. Thank you for your question.
All right, thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
Our last exhibitor is with Missouri Cannabis Reform. Once he's finished, we'll break until dinner. Dinner will be served at 6. I'll be back in about 10 seconds. That's all right. You can handle it.
We got 3 styles of T-shirts for sale. All the proceeds help out my legalization effort, Missouri Cannabis Reform. We got to legalize it. We want to legalize it to where everybody can profit, not just the rich. Free the leaf, and also one of my favorites, Blind High Disc Golf Club, but I'm a disc golf club. So we appreciate any support that you can. We sell the T-shirts for $20 a piece. It goes in for like web, like paying for like domaining, that sort of stuff, and more T-shirts, of course. So that I can get more sizes. So that way, hope like maybe be at the state fair and sell some T-shirts. I need to get somebody on that one. Got the contact information, but we really appreciate your support.
Okay, we're going to break for dinner now. You're free to do whatever you want. You can be at the Mulligan's Pub, you can go out to the pool, take a trip around Springfield. We'll meet here. Dinner will be served sharply at 6. Try to get here a couple minutes earlier, same as it was for lunch. After dinner will be our presidential candidate forum. Again, thanks to Jeff Allender for all the fantastic audiovisual help he's done for the day so far. We'll see you back here at 6 o'clock.